Hi, welcome to the channel. In this video I'm going to be reviewing the Behringer OD300 Overdrive distortion pedal and the Behringer BOD400 Bass Overdrive pedal as they relate to the electric cello. Now, first a disclaimer, I'm a beginner cellist, I've only been playing 2 years and I know next to nothing about technology. Unfortunately, on things like YouTube there's not a lot of videos about effects pedals and how they relate to the electric cello, so I'm just learning as I go along, experimenting, and hopefully you can learn along with me and see whether you want to spend money on these. They're very cheap, you know, in the UK they're £20 each, so you're not investing an awful lot of money, but we're going to find out how they sound. Now, I know a lot of people in reviews don't like you talking, so if you don't want to hear me talking, skip ahead in the video and from where I try it out. But first, a little bit of discussion about the pedals. The first thing I had to learn was what's the difference between overdrive and distortion. Apparently, overdrive takes your signal and it boosts it to the point as if you've got an amplifier and you've turned it up to the point that it's just... so it doesn't actually change the signal. It keeps the signal and just boosts it to craziness. Distortion, on the other hand, it takes your signal and it adds a sound on top of it, which is just a horribly muddy or crunchy sort of sound. So that's the difference. Now, of course, these things, the overdrive distortion is made for a guitar, and the bass overdrive is made for a bass guitar. And as it relates to the cello, of course, we go an awful lot deeper than a guitar. So, you know, I ummed and ahed about which to get, and then I thought I'd get them both to try them out. Now, here is the overdrive distortion. It has 4 knobs. You have the level, which is pretty much volume control. You have tone from low to high, so if it's on low, it's a lot bassier. If it's on high, it's a lot more treble. You have the drive, which is the amount of effect that you want to use, so the amount of distortion or the amount of overdrive that you're going to use. And then you have this pedal, this knob, and this is the interesting part of this foot pedal, is that it's an overdrive and distortion. So if you crank it all the way to the left, it's an overdrive pedal. You crank it all the way to the right, it's a distortion pedal. And if you have it in the middle, you've got an equal mix of overdrive and distortion. So depending on how much distortion and how much overdrive you want, you can twist the pedal, twist the knob. As regards the bass overdrive, it has 5 pedals. So again, you have the level. You have a low and a high boost, so you can shape your sound a bit better. It's more like, you know, an EQ sort of thing. So you can take out the treble, you can, you know, boost the bass, which is kind of what you're going to want to do because it's an electric cello, not an electric, you know, or not a bass guitar or an electric guitar. You have the gain, which again is the amount of breaking up of the signal that you're going to do. And you have the balance control. Now, I've had to, again, learn the difference between wet and dry. Apparently, dry signal is basically the signal without any effect. It's your clean signal that comes straight from the cello and goes into either your amp or your audio interface, whatever you're going to use. So you turn it all the way down, it comes through this device and there is nothing of the effect going into it. Wet, 100% wet, means it's entirely, you know, the effect. So again, you can change that to see how much of the clean signal goes through in proportion to the effect that you apply. Now, there's a lot of complaints online that I've heard that these are just cheap imitations of more expensive Boss pedals. Whereas those are metal, these are plastic and they're going to break a lot easier. Well, of course, the issue is that if you're an electric cello player, you're not going to be stamping on it like a stomp box. You're not going to be jumping around stage unless you've got like the whole rig. And if you've got the whole rig, you're probably not going to be using a £20 distortion pedal. So as obviously an electric cellist, you're going to be sitting down, it's going to be right in front of you. So you're not really going to be stamping on it. I can understand what they're saying, you know, it's made of plastic rather than metal, but it's pretty weighty and it feels kind of sturdy, so it's not such a problem. Now, they do buzz an awful lot. I mean, they're cheap and therefore there's no noise cancellation. So the second they're in, you've got a very messy sort of thing. And also, you know, I play at home, I play with headphones on, and, you know, I think if you're going to go out into, you know, the real world, out into public and do some performing, maybe not the best, no good for recording because the signal is just horrible. And I think people much prefer analog for that. But they are what they are, so let's see how they sound. Right, quick word about my setup. I've just got the two pedals, and it goes straight from the cello into the pedals into my audio interface, which I record straight onto the computer. So I've got none of the onboard reverb, so this is purely what the pedal sounds like. So we'll start, I'll chop and change and alternate between the two. We'll start with all the dials in the middle. As you can hear, that sound is hideously thin and reedy, especially down the bottom end. So I'm going to have a fiddle with the tone controls and we'll see if that makes it sound any better. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Since all of this sounds weak and horrible and I never want to hear this sound again, I'm going to cheat a bit and I'm going to introduce you to the Behringer BOD400 Bass Graphic Equalizer, which enables you to shape your sound, which on something like this I think is necessary as hell unless you want your ears to bleed for the rest of the video. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use this. It's another £20 budget pedal. However, this is the pedal that Tina Guo uses, and if it's good enough for her, it's good enough for me. So now we're going to turn the gain almost all the way down and see if that makes it sound any nicer. So this is the bass overdrive pedal with the drive down low and the wet dry down low, so it's mostly cello signal with a little bit of overdrive. So this is the distortion with the drive right down low, and it's halfway between overdrive and distortion, so equal of both. What what happens if I turn the gain all the way up to the max? Well, for that, I'll have to separate the two pedals out because they have different functions. Let's hear how they sound. So the gain is up all the way. It's full overdrive. Here we go. So now 50% overdrive, 50% distortion. Now it's 100% distortion. Now this is the bass overdrive pedal with the gain all the way up and the dry to wet ratio being about a third. This is it being 2/3 of the way from dry to wet. And this is it fully over to the right, fully wet, fully overdriven. You may be able to hear a whiny, hissy noise in your ears. That's that. I've also had to turn down the input on my audio interface because it's totally overloading everything. So. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is the power supply. These take a 9-volt battery. I haven't even bothered trying to put them in because I've read online that it's an absolute freaking nightmare unscrewing everything and trying to get it in, and it eats them like you wouldn't believe. So I just got the 9-volt power adapter because there's a little power adapter thing on the side. On the side, which is incredibly weird because you'd expect it to be in the end, especially if you're daisy chaining a whole bunch of pedals together. And so it's on the side. And the unfortunate thing about being on the side is that it's right next to the input. So when you're putting your cables in, it buzzes like crap because they're right next to each other. You've got all these wires, you know, overlapping. You've got the power coming through right next to that. So yeah, you get an awful lot of noise basically on the design of it. Now you're probably wondering, is there a sweet spot where you can, you know, turn all the dials and get a bit that's, you know, that sounds somewhat heavenly? If there is, I haven't been able to find it. Frankly, the bass overdrive pedal, I kind of wanted it for a bit of gain, to give you know the electric cello the flat signal just a little bit of edge. And to be honest, this doesn't give a little bit of edge, it distorts the hell out of what you're doing. There doesn't really seem to be a low setting where it doesn't break up the signal and make it sound really dirty and nasty. So the bass overdrive pedal, I'm quite disappointed in, especially because it's designed for the lower frequencies, and yet it still muddies up those lower frequencies. What you may have noticed I was doing with an awful lot of the bits I was playing was I was chugging, because obviously they're designed for guitars, and a guitar, you pluck the string, or you strum, you hit the string, whereas with a cello, obviously it's a much different action. It's you're in contact with the string, so every time you change direction on your bow, if you're not chugging, certainly on the lower ends, it just the notes just block into each other, and it sounds absolutely horrible. So that's why I was doing all that chugging down that end. At the higher end, you can get away with it. As regards the overdrive distortion pedal, I actually quite like it. I mean, I know it's designed for a guitar, and it kind of makes you sound like a guitar. It's got, you know, lots of overtones, lots of high pitched noises, and, you know, the bottom end, if you want to use it, you can't use it without this. Which then begs the question that if you're going to spend £20 on this and £20 on this, you might just as well pay £40 for a better pedal than this one. I do really like the way that it's got both overdrive and distortion, so you can choose between, you know, the level that you have. So even though this has only got 4 knobs and this has 5, I actually think you can do a lot more with this in terms of shaping your sound. What I, you know, don't fully understand is why you would want to sound like an electric guitar for when you play the electric cello. If you want to sound like an electric guitar, just play the electric guitar. But of course, I think, you know, this one will come in handy if you're in a rock band, if you're in a metal band. I'm not so sure it's going to have a much broader use in the general scheme of things, but, you know, that's what it is. So those two pedals, those are the Behringer Overdrive Distortion OD300 and the Bass Overdrive BOD400. And you've heard how they sound, you've heard some of the issues that you'll face, being as they were designed for guitars, not the electric cello, because most pedals aren't designed for the electric cello. Hopefully you enjoyed the review and you've learned something from it. And if you did, then please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.